Hi, everybody, and welcome to Pop Therapy, a podcast where we explore the intersection between psychology and pop culture. There's so much to unpack, so let's get started. Well. Let me try that one more time. Well, here we are. It is February 6th. I feel the need to timestamp this because I actually don't have any idea as to when I'll release any of these episodes, if at all, to be honest with you. So I feel like getting a sense of where I am in time as I record this is probably important. So like I said in the intro, this podcast hopes to sort of explore the intersection between pop culture and psychology, to explore the relationship between the two and how they influence one another and how they are sort of always hand in hand when it comes to conversations, right? Like anytime you talk about psychology, you're talking about culture to some degree. And anytime you're talking about culture, you are, of course, talking about psychology to some degree, right? Maybe on an individual level or on a larger scale. So today we're going to talk about the psychology of starting, the psychology of motivation, and of course, how my own psychology sort of is impacted by those two things, or the relationship between those two things and my psychology. And, I think it's probably a good idea to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this podcast. And this has been something that I've been thinking about for years at this point. So this doesn't feel like a rash decision or some like thoughtless idea or decision, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying to do and concerning for me. But honestly, what really kind of motivated me to record this podcast was Trump winning again the election for a second term. And that just really got me thinking a lot. Like I did a lot of observing and listening, because when the shit hits the fan, my default tends to be to sort of like withdraw, not isolate, but to withdraw a little bit and do a little bit of research or try and observe or try to understand what's going on, essentially trying to wrap my mind around what's going on. And while I wasn't surprised by his win, there were a few things I was surprised about. But in the end, again, this is my coping strategy, is to try and wrap my mind around things by trying to understand and by trying to learn, right? To try and make some meaning out of the dumpster fire that is American politics. So that's, among other things, is really what sort of kickstarted this. I've also gotten like really encouraging feedback, or not necessarily feedback, but just words of encouragement from friends and from people that I trust that, again, are like rooting for me and would be happy to know that I'm finally recording this. Again, who knows if I'll release anything, but I guess we'll see. I guess we'll find out and see how this goes. The other reason why I wanted to start a podcast was because there's this really rapid, there's like a really rapid growth on social media of mental health clinicians or mental health, I don't know, quote unquote experts, sometimes licensed or certified and sometimes not, sometimes trained and educated and sometimes not so much. But there's this like growing field of social media, pop psychology, mental health thing happening out there. And I call it a field because it does at this point seem big enough to sort of acknowledge it as a thing, right? Like a thing that we have to address, a thing that me as a clinician, I feel responsible for my clients to take that into account, right? To take into account that they are consuming content constantly, and not just a movie, a TV show, but that they're also consuming a ton of content around mental health topics, around psychology. And it's been really interesting because it's not something that I was trained at navigating when I was in school. This was not discussed when I was in grad school. I think at the most we went into, as far as like a conversation around social media, the most that was discussed was just like, basically keep your profile private, right? Like you cannot follow your clients and your clients should not be following you. And that was it. That was really it. The idea of posting something, a video on Instagram or on TikTok, talking about mental health issues, talking about mental health concerns, just no one saw that coming. And that's obviously, that is not like an original thought, right? Like I don't think anyone saw any of this coming as far as social media is concerned, right? Like the way it's evolved, I don't think many of us saw that coming. So, or rather, but here we are. And I tried to do I did post a bunch of content on TikTok and I think mostly Instagram, to be honest with you, but TikTok as well, because I thought like, okay, well, I do want to make the information that I know, the information that I've been taught, as accessible as possible. There are a lot of barriers to entry when it comes to therapy. Obviously, cost is one of them. It's a big one, of course. And so I thought like, okay, I do want to make this more accessible. I don't just want people that can afford therapy to have access to the information that I have, right? And to have access to the interventions that I provide my clients, right? So I thought like, okay, I can make it about that, right? Like I can make it about accessibility. And so I gave it a shot and I made a bunch of videos, not many by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot for me, I will say. And it's not that I didn't like it, and it's not that I don't see a utility in social media, or rather like having conversations on social media or posting information on social media about mental health issues, but it didn't feel authentic to me because, and this is very true of me as a therapist, right? I'm all about the slow burn, right? Like I am all about the long game. When I'm working with a client, I am playing the long game, right? And social media, for better or for worse, isn't really developed for that. It's not really about the long game on social media. It is about bite-sized pieces of information. It's about like snack food, information as snack food, information as like a little packet of gummy bears that you can just like chomp on once, and that's that. No shade to gummy bears. I love them so much, but you get the point, right? And some clinicians on social media are so good at saying so much in 90 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds. It really blows my mind. Some clinicians are so good at saying so much with very little time. And I'm like, bravo, like someone's got to do it. You know what I mean? Like someone with the training, with the knowledge, with the experience. If you can do that, if you can synthesize dense information in like 60 seconds to 10 minutes, again, God bless. I think that is such an impressive skill. It's aspirational. To be quite frank with you, for me, I would love to be able to do that. But I'm a talker, right? Like I'm all about world building. I'm all about really getting to understand a topic, getting to understand my clients, getting to understand like an issue with as much depth as humanly possible. And I just appreciate the long form of podcasting. I appreciate that that's available to me, right? And that I don't have to condense decades worth of experience and knowledge in the field of mental health, specifically social work, into bite-sized nuggets of snack food. And again, no shade to anyone that does. That is such an impressive skill. But yeah, I kind of want to have a conversation about it. You know what I mean? And conversation. I'm using air quotes here because am I having a conversation on, when I'm talking to myself on a microphone? I totally get that. But the way that I want to structure this is as if we are having a conversation. One where we can explore depth and we can explore things like nuance when we are talking about the intersection between psychology and pop culture and culture at large, frankly. So I figured since I didn't feel confident in being able to say what I wanted to say in 10 minutes or less, because I didn't feel confident or comfortable discussing topics and ideas and themes as it relates to mental health in such a condensed amount of time, I thought, okay, so maybe it's about the podcast. Maybe that's the avenue that you should explore. So here we are. That is, some of the rationale behind why I am starting this podcast. And I hope that makes sense. And this is really scary to do, even though I haven't committed, like as I am recording this, I have not committed to releasing a single thing. I might record like 20 episodes and they end up locked away in a vault somewhere. It'd be cool if I didn't do that, but that is a possibility that I have to be realistic about that I might record a bunch and never release a single episode. I hope I don't. I hope I have the courage to release these episodes, or I hope I'm like, maybe it's not courage, but I hope I'm like bold enough to just be like, whatever, right? Like that kind of confidence and courage. I don't mean courage, capital C courage, but I just mean like, let's just go for it. Like take a swing, take a big swing, take a risk. The stakes are so low. You're not performing brain surgery. Like chill out and just release it. That is my hope. I hope I reach that place where I am right now. And this gets into the psychology of starting something and the psychology of motivation. So where I am now is I'm sort of like, how dare you think you could record a podcast? Like, how dare you think anyone would want to hear anything that you had to say? And it's very like, who do you think you are? Like, oh, who do you think? Oh, yeah. You think people want to hear what you have to say? And like that voice is going on in my head. The other thing too is that I just feel so, I mean, like, as you can probably tell, I don't know what I'm doing as far as like recording this podcast. Like, I don't know. Like I bought equipment. I had it for such a long time. I had the mic and the interface thingy. I don't even know the name for it. I waited till like I bought a new computer. I put all these roadblocks in front of me, like, well, I have to get this first and I have to get this first and I need to get that thing first. And, and then your mind sort of finds these like really clever ways of presenting you with like very, at least seemingly rational and valid reasons why you can't start something. So for me, and this is something that I'm not going to say is a bad thing. I don't think it's bad at all. I actually kind of like this part of my brain or the way that my brain does this. So in order to avoid recording the podcast, I'll do something like clean my stove or like I'll do laundry. Or I'll like vacuum my rug or something like that, right? And the reason why I like it is because essentially because I keep putting off recording this podcast, my stove has never been cleaner. And I like that. I like walking into the kitchen and being like, oh, wow, I really like did the damn thing. Now in the back of my head, I also know, Omar, I'm onto you. I know you are randomly, or you are all of a sudden cleaning the stove is the most important thing in the world because you are clearly avoiding something else or you are putting off something else. And, I think that's relevant, right? I can't, or rather, I don't want to deny that reality because it's true. What's also true is that I do want to clean my stove. So that is also true. And that I am happy that she's as clean as ever. But at some point, I kept having the same conversation in my head. Just like, Omar, this is something you've wanted to do for a long time. And I thought about it the way a lot of people talk about tattoos. Something I heard once was like, if you want a tattoo and you're still thinking about it, I don't know, like 3-6 months later, a year later, you're still thinking about it, then you should probably get one, right? As opposed to having a fleeting thought, or like, as opposed to like, oh, I would like, yeah, sure, I should dye my hair blonde. And then the next day you forget about it. And it's like, oh, okay, then I probably shouldn't dye my hair blonde. Like it's actually not a desire that's strong at all. It's not a burning desire. So I thought about podcasting similarly to the whole tattoo analogy. And I figured, all right, well, it's like years later and you're still thinking about it and you're still crossing off things on your to-do list. Although, again, like that's the thing about our minds, is that it comes up with these really seemingly rational reasons to not do something. So like, of course, I can't start a podcast until I do research on what is the best mic for podcasting. And again, I think superficially at face value, one could argue like, well, yeah, you want good equipment, right? It doesn't have to be the most expensive, but you want it to be good. And because I don't know a single thing about the technology involved, one could also argue, yes, Omar, you should do a certain amount of research, like read some reviews, look at some comments, but there is a threshold, right? That once you cross over it, it's less about learning for the sake of being prepared or well-informed, and it's learning for the sake of avoiding, for the sake of stalling, for the sake of like fear and anxiety, essentially. And the idea of putting this out there and having other people listen to this and have opinions and judgments, which is like fine, right? Like it's human, right? I'm not saying I'm thrilled to know that, but I do understand that it is part of the human condition. Like we're going to have hot takes. People are going to have opinions. Hopefully, most of them good, or at least helpful. But I know that when you decide to try and like, I don't know, like make your life bigger, and it's not a fully formulated thought, but like when you try to make your life bigger, when you try to kind of like step out to any degree, when you try to step out like in public or in the public eye, even though I'm totally aware that 2 people are going to listen to this, but you're running the risk of more people listening to your podcast the more that you record. So the thought of that is really, really uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. And there's a reason why I really, really enjoy the like solitary nature of my work. I'm a therapist here in New York, and I probably should have started out saying that, but I'm a therapist here in New York, and it's me, it's my practice, it's just me. I don't have like clinicians working under me or anything like that, or interns. It's just me. It's a solo private practice. And I enjoy the solitary nature of that. Now, solitary, insofar as like, like I work with people. Obviously, I have clients. But like outside of that solitary, right? Like I'm not working in an office. I don't have an office job. I don't have a gajillion coworkers running around, knocking on my door or showing up to my desk or whatever. It's like once a client leaves the room, I close the door and it's like just me. And I really like that. There's something about like staying small. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I don't mean like small, like weak or meek or like afraid. Not that, but to sort of stay private. There's something nice about that. It feels like a cocoon, like a very protective cocoon, when it's just like you doing your own thing with clients. And that's it. And there's something like obviously, or maybe not obviously, very comforting about that. Like, I really, really like that. So the idea of potentially exposing myself sounds bad, but the idea of like exposure, let's put it that way, more exposure, even the risk of it, right? Like, again, 2 people will listen to this, but even the risk of more exposure makes me feel so, so, so uncomfortable. That played a huge role in why I stalled. And the good news is, or at least I think it's good news, is that I was never under the illusion that that was not at the core of what was going on, right? I was always pretty aware, if not fully aware, that that's what was happening, right? That most of my attempts to be as prepared as possible were actually attempts to stall the project. So, I wasn't under any illusion that that wasn't at play. So for what it's worth, I'm glad that I knew that. Like, I didn't have to go on some major like self-exploration journey in order to figure that out. I've been like, yeah, I'm kind of on to myself. Like, yeah, I know what I'm up to. Like, yeah. And we all have those things, right? Where you're like, yeah, to the casual observer, this may seem like totally chill and normal and fine, but like internally, you're like, yeah, I'm like kind of trying to get away with something. I'm like trying to avoid something, or I'm trying to like not do something that I know I could do or that I want to do, but it's scary. And so I think that like that ability to be onto yourself is really important and part of what I try to instill in clients and hopefully instill in anyone who listens to this, right? To sort of like reinforce this idea that that voice that's like sort of onto yourself, that's a skill. That's not everybody has that. A lot of folks make decisions and behave without really knowing why they're doing it, like for real. And just because you know what's at the core of a quote unquote issue doesn't mean that you will suddenly be inspired to change it. Change takes time. So yeah, like here's to the people that are onto themselves, here's to the people that are waiting or stalling or cleaning their oven instead of taking that big swing, because I am right there with you. I know exactly how that feels. And at some point, whenever you're ready, I want you to take that big swing. And no one can decide when you're ready except you. So whenever you decide that you're ready to take that swing, to take that risk, there's no deadline, there's no rush inherently, then I just like want you to go for it. So here's to the folks that are still thinking about or still in the middle of deciding when they're ready to take that risk. Motivation is such a it feels like such a fickle thing. I was going to say motivation is such a fickle thing. I actually don't know if it is or isn't. It certainly fucking feels that way. I'll tell you that much. I mean, I've had moments, of course, when I like wake up in the morning or wake up after a nap and I feel really motivated. I feel energized. I feel kind of pumped. And I'll use that energy to like do something, right? Like go work out or clean or organize or file my taxes or something, right? Like you wake up and you just like, all right, I'm ready to take on the world. That happens so infrequently to me. When that kind of energy hits, it is like, like God up. It's like, finally, you know what I mean? Like, finally, the motivation strikes me. And over time, I've realized this like other painful truth, other painful reality about motivation, which is sometimes it falls on your lap, right? Sometimes it does seem to come out of nowhere. Now, whether it actually does, like that's a whole other conversation, but sometimes it feels like it comes out of nowhere. The energy, the inspiration, the motivation. But the other truth is that most of the time, motivation is something you have to cultivate. Motivation is something you have to nourish like a plant, right? And that to me is the suckiest part about motivation. Like I wish we could just sit back and just be patient and wait for motivation to strike us. Like I wish we knew like, oh yeah, like eventually it comes and then you'll be motivated and it's like, great. So just like hang out. I would love that. I would absolutely love that. But instead, what I know to be true is that oftentimes we have to encourage the motivation. Like we have to be our own like parent rooting for their kid on the soccer field or whatever. Like you can do it. Like just have fun. You know what I mean? Like do your best or whatever. You have to be your own cheerleader in that way. If motivation were a part of you, the conscious part of you or the aware part of you, the part of you that's aware of that version of you has to sort of step in and say, like, you can do this, let's help you along, let's root for you, all of that. And there are lots of ways to cultivate motivation. And there rarely will be. There is no like one size fits all approach to cultivating motivation. You really have to, I mean, that's part of the work, right? So you have to figure that out for yourself. And that requires a ton of trial and error. And sometimes you try something once and you're like, oh my God, that was amazing, right? Like it worked. And that's the best feeling ever. But most of the time, like with dating, you kind of have to date around. You're going to have to try a bunch of things and eventually narrow your list down. You're sort of going to try everything, and every time something doesn't work, you cross it off the like potential tools that you can use to cultivate and nourish your own motivation. So for me, I think a lot of it has to do with not just visualizing that, because that is kind of fun to just like, to visualize the thing that you want to do and to have like happy thoughts about it and to visualize, the best case scenario. It is also helpful for me to physically do something about it. So, and this is part of what makes it tricky, because doing things like buying a proper mic to record this podcast is doing something, and it is getting me one step closer. But again, there are ways in which that can turn against me. Like if I am doing months worth of research on what is the best mic instead of just buying a GD mic. So doing things within reason or doing things within like a reasonable time is something that I find really helpful. And I was listening to someone, and I'm going to do this a lot, where I'm like, oh yeah, this person said this, but I don't remember who it was. I'm pretty sure it was like a neuropsychologist or like neurobiologist, someone that focused a lot on the biology of the brain and like the neurobiology of the brain and how that works, right? And how that relates to psychology. So I was listening to someone who did that. And he said, if you want to do something, but you're having a tough time like feeling motivated or feeling inspired, do these 3 things. And he says, first, write down the thing that you want to do. So in my case, I want to start a podcast. Next, you read it out loud. I want to start a podcast. Next, you read it silently to yourself. That's step 2. And lastly, you visualize it. And so those are the 3 steps. You write it down, or 4 steps. You know what I mean? You write it down, you say it out loud, you say it to yourself, and you visualize. 4 steps. And you do that several times. You don't just do it once, but you do it several times. And essentially what you're doing is you're sort of priming your brain to be in pursuit of this goal. This is a little bit like, I guess this is essentially the science behind manifestation, not manifestation in like the magical sense. I mean, like for real, that there's like some psychology behind it. There's some neurobiology behind it. And so when you do those 4 steps several times, you're creating neural pathways. You're like priming your brain. You're setting it to particular mode to seek out opportunities to do the thing that you want to do. And the more that you engage in those 4 steps, or that you complete those 4 steps, the more you'll sort of start to notice steps that you can take, the more that you'll notice opportunities that you can take, the more that you'll recognize the potential to get closer to that goal, and the more sort of activated you are to take those steps. Now, is that absolutely true? Like, I don't know, but it's harmless. So I gave it a shot and I did that. Now, I certainly didn't do it like a million times. I did it a handful of times. You know what I mean? And is that what helped me find the motivation to do this? Who knows? But here's what I do know. It certainly didn't hurt. You know what I mean? I can't imagine that doing that slowed me down in any kind of meaningful way. So I was like, all right, like, sure, why not? Let me do this. And anytime it came to mind, the 4 steps, I was just like, oh yeah, let me just like do that real quick. So sometimes in between sessions, I would do that. Sometimes if I was just like home by myself, not doing anything, I would do that. So, you know, anytime it came to mind, I wasn't super disciplined about it. I wasn't like a drill sergeant about it, but that's also not my style. The second something feels like homework, or the second something feels like there's a drill sergeant watching over me, I'm like, well, I'm not going to do it. So that's not the best approach to life. I know that, but that's for me and my therapist to discuss. But, you know, if I treat something like homework, I'm just like less likely to do it. So I treated it as like, here's something you can do, like that sort of thing. Like, oh, here's like a quick, like 1 minute exercise or task that you can accomplish. And, you know, it did feel productive, lowercase p, productive, right? Just like, oh, okay, there was like an actionable item that I completed today, you know, and that didn't change things overnight. Of course, again, rarely does change happen overnight. It happens in increments, typically. So I hope no one expects to try this exercise out and then wake up the next day taking the swing. That would be great. I mean, don't get me wrong. That would be awesome. I just don't want you to set yourself up for disappointment. I want you to sort of go into this with a healthy sense of skepticism and just, you know, with an understanding of how you work and how, like, just like the reality of life. That is that sometimes things happen immediately and sometimes they don't. So the motivation piece is something that I talk to clients a lot about. And that was another thing that I thought a lot about that motivated me to start this podcast, which is the fact that I am near constantly telling clients, write that book, start that podcast, write that screenplay, choreograph that dance, ask that person out, cook that meal, make that phone call, ask that question. Like, do the risky thing. Do the thing that feels so exposing or vulnerable. Do the thing that feels really, really risky, even though the stakes are often, not every time, but often the stakes are not that high. So do the thing. I mean, we have like at best a D- student running the country right now. If that D-, if that, like that's, I feel like I'm being generous. So if he can do that, then right, like I tell my clients, then you can literally do whatever you want. So that was always in the back of my mind, right? It was like that whole thing of feeling a little hypocritical. Now, you know, I don't want to be too hard on myself because I am also very patient with clients. Like, I'm never like, you need to do this by next week. You know what I mean? Like, I might say, why don't we set this as an intention and a goal and let's like talk about it next week? Or like, why don't you shoot or aim to do this by next week, and then we'll talk about it, right? But I'm never, if a client comes in and they're like, I didn't do the thing, I'm never like scolding, like finger wagging at them, like, you really screwed up. I don't care about that. I'm not in the business of like being I'm not a teacher. I'm not like, you didn't do your homework, like that's a demerit. I'm just like, that's not what I do. And and I'm not saying that that's a terrible thing to do, but that's not what I'm in the business of doing. So the fact that I would talk about this with clients, and the fact that I would be so encouraging and so like cheerleadery and so like, you can do it, take the swing. Life is all about swings, big swings, little swings. Life is all about risks. Life is all about stepping outside of your comfort zone sometimes. The fact that that was constantly me, and then like I go home and I'm like, I'm going to fold my laundry instead of recording that podcast, was sort of eating away at me. You know what I mean? I not necessarily that I felt like a fraud. That's like way too strong of a word, or even a hypocrite, but maybe like lowercase h hypocrite. I really, I'd really sort of chase myself down and say, Omar, you have to start walking the walk. You at some point you have got to start walking the walk. Even if it's you try it once and never again, you've got to at least try. And the psychology of motivation, the psychology of starting something, I think is pretty obviously related. Like there's a relationship between the two things. There's a reason why they say the first step is the hardest. I think it takes the most activation energy. I think it takes the most effort in some ways because it's so uncertain. And you take that step and you're not entirely sure of the footing. You're not entirely sure of how it's going to feel, if you're going to feel grounded, if you're going to feel safe, if you're going to feel secure, stable. And a lot of the times we don't know that. And I think that's what makes people kind of awesome. I think that's what makes courageous people, bold people, that courageous and bold, is that they take these risks not because they're not afraid, but in spite of being afraid. They push through, they breathe through it, and they take the risk while being afraid. And that to me is so impressive. If I was never afraid, it would be easy to do things. Of course, if we were never afraid or insecure, it'd be so easy to do anything. But that's what makes it a challenge. You know what I mean? And that's what to me makes it so impressive when someone does take that leap of faith. I'm like, wow, I know you are terrified and you are doing it anyway. And I just think that that is one of the coolest things ever. And while I want everyone taking big swings and risks, I also want you being patient with yourself and understanding and compassionate, sure, but like fiercely compassionate, right? Like it is okay to take your time, but also, keep your eye on the ball, right? Like don't forget the thing that you committed to yourself, or the thing that you promised yourself. So I don't know, motivation, starting things, it's all like really, really difficult. And we see examples of this all over. We hear stories of like actors who never got their flowers, like Demi Moore, right? Like actors that never got their flowers, never got the praise or accolades that they worked for, like finally get it, decades later. And I think that's an example of someone sticking to something in spite of the doubt or insecurities, like sticking to it. Because staying put, sticking to something is also risky. Sticking to a path, despite people kind of being like, you'll never really like amount to much, or like, yeah, you'll never really be that thing. You'll never win that award, or you'll never get that, like whatever. You'll never get that thing that somehow like legitimizes you. I don't know. But to stick with it in spite of the lack of that is, related to what we're talking about here. And we hear stories all the time of often artists who talk about inspiration. And I tend to think of inspiration and motivation as almost identical. I'm sure if I thought about it more, there are some differences, sure. But I often interchange the two. And I think it's like something we all struggle with to some degree, right? You have an idea, you have a thing that you want to do, but it seems daunting or it seems impossible or it seems like too much work or too much effort or not worth it. So, how do you take the next step while feeling that way? Is what I want everyone to ask themselves. And I want everyone to kind of investigate what that could look like for you. So, yeah, that's why I'm doing this. I'm hoping to have guests on. I have a list of guests that I think will be really interesting and funny and smart. And we'll talk about some serious things, surely, but we'll have like a really good time along the way. And we'll laugh and we'll joke and we'll organize and coordinate and we'll help each other out, all while talking about the human experience, all while talking about our psychology and pop culture. So that's it for today. Bear in mind that this and all podcasts for that matter are no substitute for good old-fashioned therapy. And keep in mind, therapy makes you hotter. Bye.